Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari 8-bit games, some of which I grew up with and some which are new to me. Today's game is Loco, which was a 1984 release by Alligata, originally for Commodore 64 and imported to Atari 8-bit and ZX Spectrum in 1986. The game is an early work by one Antony Crowther, a developer who grew to prominence throughout the 8-bit era for his prolific output. A lot of his games were put together in just 2 weeks. Now, Crowther later went on to become known for a number of well-regarded first-person RPGs on 16-bit platforms and PC, including Captive, Nightmare and Realms of the Haunting. Loco itself is a clone of Sega's 1982 arcade game Super Locomotive, which was very rare in arcades and never received any official home ports. And this led many people at the time to think that Loco itself was a completely original work, but no, it's based on an arcade machine. So, let's go play Loco.
Okay, here we are with Loco from Alligata Software. Graphics by Russell Knight. Program by Russell Knight. Music by MUSIC. Constructive criticism by A. Wilson. Oh, I remember reading something about that. MUSIC stands for something. I can't remember what it is though. If I remember to look it up while I'm editing this, I will put it on the screen for you. But yeah, it definitely stands for something. It was like a couple of people collaborating together. Anyway, let's play Loco. So if you've not come across this game before, you are in control of that train that just exploded. And you have a few different controls. So the fire button will send out some smoke, and that will take down any airborne threats, such as the planes and the bombs that they shoot. And you also have a missile you can shoot in front of you by pushing right on the controller, and that takes out any of the sort of little carriages that are coming towards you. And so the game is about juggling a whole bunch of things. It's about keeping an eye on the incoming threats, but it's also about keeping an eye on your fuel level at the top. And you'll see on the map down at the bottom, you see there's various fuel dumps along the way. And so what you'll probably want to try and do is maneuver through as many of those as possible, just so you don't get caught short, as it were. But at the same time, you need to be keeping an eye on everything that's going on. And so to navigate on the map down at the bottom, you just push up and down to change direction at an intersection. Sorry, I'm British. Junction. And your aim, as far as I'm aware anyway, is just keep going as long as possible. I don't think there is like a way to beat this game, as it were, or is there? Oh, I just went through something. Oh no! I say that blue mark on the map, I think that's like a station. In the original Super Locomotive anyway, that would have been a station. And I think after that point it gets a bit harder, because if you look, anytime the planes come over, we're being attacked by 2 of them at once now. So I think if you reach one of those, the difficulty increases. It doesn't appear to acknowledge that anywhere on the screen. It just sort of naturally increases in difficulty as you do that. Can we do anything by pressing select an option? No, it doesn't look that way. So, yeah, what you see is what you get. Yeah, so this is just a game about concentrating on as many things as possible at the same time. That's where the challenge comes from. And enjoying the novelty of playing a game about a train, which is not something we saw a great deal of back at this point in gaming history. So yeah, this was cool to see at the time. This is one of those games that I remember us getting hold of, and it was one of the many, many games that we did not obtain a copy of through legitimate means. It was, in previous episodes I've mentioned the computer club, which my dad and my brother used to attend on a fairly regular basis. And for me, sort of one of the big defining things about that computer club was the fact that on several occasions they came back absolutely laden with new software for us to enjoy. Oh, those ones that drop towards your back end, they're really difficult to hit. So I guess you got to shoot a bit of smoke up that drifts back into them. That's very tricky. Now, obviously, the music in this is the Chattanooga choo-choo, which I actually didn't know at the time. That wasn't a piece of music I was familiar with. The only time I'd encountered it, oddly enough, was when it was quoted in a Garfield comic, and I didn't know how the tune went. So when I first played this game, I didn't know that was what the tune was. That was that it was a well-known tune. And so the bit of this game's music that's really stuck with me over the years is that sort of screeching bit at the beginning, which I guess is supposed to sort of simulate the sound of a train whistle or something like that. It's effective, and it's certainly memorable. And I mean, on the whole, this game is a pretty good example of the Atari A-bit's capabilities. We've got nice, smooth scrolling. We've got colourful graphics. We've got smoothly moving sprites. We've got multiple graphics modes on screen at once. And we've got graphics 0 on the status bar at the top. And then whatever the rest of the graphics are drawn in underneath. We've got a nice bit of sort of quasi-parallax scrolling. So yeah, I mean, as a relatively late release on the platform, this is quite a good representative example of what the Atari 8-bit was capable of in the hands of someone who knew what they were doing with it. And as far as I'm aware, this is the only sort of home port, or rip-off, basically, of Super Locomotive. This actually became a little bit more well-known than some other Atari 8-bit games because, as you probably know, in the grand scheme of 8-bit computer history, it tends to be platforms like the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 that are more fondly remembered by a lot of people. But from a bit of perusing around the internet while I was researching this, it seems that this is one of the games where the Atari 8-bit version is a reasonably well-known version and well-regarded, which is cool. It's always nice to see the dear old Atari 8-bit get a bit more widespread love than it normally does. Yeah, this is a tricky old game just because of how many things you have to keep an eye on at once. But it's fun. It's fun because it was something very different from anything else that was around at the time. I mean, there were games where you had to look at multiple things at once, but nothing quite like this. And I mean, each of the things you're doing at once is very simple. You're pressing fire, or you're pushing right, or you're pushing up and down. But just the combination of those factors makes this an interesting game. And as I say, also a nice showcase of the Atari 8-bit's capabilities as well, which is cool. Whoops! I love that sound of it. The train just being destroyed as well. It's such a good explosion sound. But yeah, that's essentially all there is to this game, but it's sort of classic arcade fare. Just survive as long as you can, score as many points as you can, gradually build up your skill as the game becomes more and more complex and challenging, and eventually declare yourself a Loco Master. I am not a Loco Master, but I am certainly much better at this game than I was as a kid. I don't think I quite understood the idea of how you're supposed to divide your attention between all the different things when I was a kid. Like, I understood the firing smoke and I understood the firing out in front, but I think I struggled a bit with combining that with the navigating the map down at the bottom as well. Oh, it's intense, but we... Oh no! We're going so well. We do have a high score though. I think so far as the planes are concerned, you need to kind of anticipate them rather than deal with them when they're overhead. Yeah, that seems to be the way to go. And then that leaves you a bit more time to deal with the carts when they appear. Because otherwise you run the risk of getting hit by a bomb like that. And no one likes getting hit by bombs. Oh no! Right. Maybe one more go. 11,975. That's a good score. For me, anyway. Let's see if we can top that. As far as I'm aware, there's like no way of scoring bonus points in this or anything like that. It's all just how long you survive, how many things you shoot, basically. So you'll notice you don't even get you don't get points for how far you go. You just get points for destroying stuff. So although I guess destroying stuff is part of the survival process anyway. So the further you go, the naturally you'll score more points. I find it quite interesting to look at scoring systems. It's not something I really sort of consciously thought about a lot when I was a kid. But I found it so much more interesting to look at scoring mechanics ever since they've stopped being quite so relevant for a lot of modern games. Because it means when they do come up, and they're relevant to the experience, like in a shoot 'em up, for example. Yeah, there's often some sort of interesting analysis to be done there as to how it's actually rewarding the player, and if it's doing so in a fair way. Which, in a score attack game, is super important. Because ideally, you don't want to end up with a game where just doing the bare minimum for as long as possible will reward the player in the same way as it will them taking a few risks or demonstrating their skills more effectively. And that's an area where a lot of modern Japanese shoot-'em-up developers in particular really excel. With highly creative scoring systems that reward taking risks. And you've probably often heard me and others say that the core of a good arcade-style experience is providing a sense of risk versus reward. And it's absolutely true. Part of the reason arcade games are fun is because they encourage you to take risks. And then if you successfully pull off those risks, then you get rewarded for them. I mean, it's pretty simple in terms of psychology, but it works. It's effective. It's proven. And it's not just for arcade games either. In fact, it's not even just for video games. Like, at the time of recording, last night, I played a board game with some friends called Quacks of Quedlinburg. And that was all very much based on risk versus reward. It's a push your luck game where you're drawing ingredients out of a bag and putting them in your cauldron and trying not to get your ingredients to add up to a particular value, because then your potion making cauldron explodes. Just going to shut the curtains slightly because I'm... That's not much better, is it? Never mind. Yes, I just noticed that I was blowing my face out on the camera. Not that you care, but yeah, that game was all based around the idea of risk versus reward, in that you sort of built up this bag full of potion ingredients turn by turn. And a lot of that was in an attempt to mitigate the amount of risk you had to put in and maximise the rewards you could get. But that risk was always there. There was no way of completely eliminating the risk altogether. And there were some really interesting decisions to make as you went through the game. Because you get to a point where you could see what the other people were doing and you'd think, I could carry on, but there's one ingredient in my bag that if I draw, it will completely mess me up for this turn. And that made it really exciting, because you knew that, say, you had 5 chips left in your bag and only one of them was going to mess you up. But it was still an interesting decision to make as to whether or not you should keep pushing it, because you knew at some point, when you least expected it, that one that would mess you up was going to come out of the bag. But because it was chance-based, there was always that exciting gamble you had to make. And it was really fun. I mean, it wasn't a game where there was a lot of direct interaction between people, but the interesting thing came from pushing your luck in comparison to the other players. And so, like I said, that was a key part of that game's design. It's what made it exciting. And although the implementation of risk and reward is very different in an arcade-style game, the principle is the same. It's about deciding whether it's safe to do something, or if your chances of failure are sufficient or insufficient to make you want to actually take a chance on something. Oh, we beat my high score. Or 13,775. Let's have one more try. Let's call this the last go. Now let's enjoy that risk versus reward to the maximum. But yeah, I was looking into the history of Super Locomotive while I was researching this episode, and I found it interesting because I'm aware of Super Locomotive now for one reason or another, but apparently there was like a really low number of PCBs created for the arcade, so it's a super rare arcade machine. And it's not that they've been lost over the years, it's that they just didn't make very many of them in the first place. I don't know why. Perhaps they just thought a game about a train wouldn't sell very well, but I mean, evidently it... Whoops! Evidently it left enough of an impression on Richard Knight here to... Is it Richard Knight? I think it was anyway. The airship says RK on it anyway, so I'm going to say his name's Richard Knight for now. Oh! But yeah, evidently for one reason or another, it left an impression on him to make him want to make this. That was a pitiful last go, wasn't it? So one more try. Just one more try. You know, I find it interesting when you talk about games being addictive this date, or addicting, as some people say. That's a real bugbear of mine, because they're not addicting, they're addictive. But yeah, back in the day, when you'd look at magazine articles about games on the Atari or whatever platform, they would specifically describe addictiveness as a sense of wanting just one more go, and there's always just one more go in quotes and that sort of thing. That was particularly a thing in Page 6, I remember, but I'm sure I also saw it in Atari User and probably some other places as well. And it's just a sort of turn of phrase that doesn't seem to get used that much anymore. I guess it's always been part of the Civ series, with the just one more turn thing you get when you finish a game. But it's not something you tend to hear in the games press anymore. Oh, getting a bit low on fuel. Give me some fuel! Oh no! Oh, so many things to think about in this game. Nearly 10,000. Not bad. Could be better. 13,775 for my high score though. That'll do for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.